Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
I got back home from work 3 hours early from my job as a diesel mechanic. The whole shop has been putting in 50-hour weeks for the past 2 months. We have a contract with a tight schedule to rebuild over 50 B-Series Cummins diesel engines. Today, we found out that we were officially ahead of our schedule by 2 days. We're pretty worn out, and the bosses knew that we're worn out. Heading home, I knew I was filthy, my normal filthy. Trisha is normally waiting for me with a robe, so I can go directly to the shower. She doesn't get home for another 2 hours, so I'm going directly to the laundry room. There I'll drop my dirty clothing in my special basket and then head naked to the bathroom to take a shower. Rebuilding diesel engines, I'm around many chemicals at work, but so far it hasn't damaged my sense of smell, yet. I know I stink from sweating, and I stink of chemicals and exhaust too. The laundry room is small. Hell, the whole house is small. It's 1,100 square feet with 2 bedrooms, a 2.5-car garage on a large lot near the highway here in Overland Park, Kansas. Don't give me any shit about the school board. I don't want to hear it. I didn't vote for those a-holes either, so just shut your goddamn face about that shit. We got this repo from the bank for less than $50 grand. The previous owners had literally trashed the place, but I knew that the bones were solid. We ended up gutting one room at a time. Only after we got a fully functioning bathroom and a barely functioning kitchen working. Those first 6 months were brutal. Taking off my shirt, I smell something not right. At the pile of dirty clothes at my feet, I smelled sex. I knew Trisha's smell, but there was more, and it was strong. I knew that could not be me. Her time of the month started 2 nights ago. She never wanted any lovemaking during that time, so I'd always stayed away. Picking up her clothing, I saw and smelled dried cum and smelled cigarette smoke on her blouse and jeans. She doesn't smoke. Eric, the asshole wannabe wrench who rents our garage, does. In his spare time, Eric takes rice buckets and turns them into low-end street racers on the cheap. Looks like cars weren't the only thing he was working on. Zero tolerance. When you trust somebody, you don't ask probing questions, you don't look beyond what they say. I have zero tolerance for this shit. I didn't take this shit from my first wife, and as my name is Glenn, I don't with my current wife. I thought that since we were both burned in our first marriages, we would never think of screwing anyone else. Not physically, not emotionally. I thought that our lives were pretty much open and supportive of each other. I guess that I was wrong. It's deja vu all over again. Recovering from being burned is how we stated our relationship. Recovering from being burned again is how I'll walk out of it. I got pretty good planning the rehab of this fixer-upper. Those planning skills will help me end this sham marriage too. Then it hit me. Sonafach. Gotta get calm. Sitting quietly on the washer, I exhale slowly. Repeat. Repeat another 20 more times. Get calm. Do that mindfulness shit. Take your goddamn sweet time, Glenn. You are all you've got. 20 minutes of stopping my life. Let me think without the dread. I now have 2 goals. The first is to prove without any doubt that she is stepping out. The second is to legally end this marriage with the minimum of financial loss. Well, I think I got 3 goals. Third goal is to move on with my life as quick as possible. The easiest one to do first is ending the marriage. Yeah, right, in my ever-loving dreams. I can just snap my fingers and it'll be over. Just like last time. When in doubt, ask Wiki. It's not always totally correct, but it's great for an overview. I Google search Wiki how to divorce in Kansas. I may not know much about computers, but I can do easy searches. Holy shit. With no kids, it's only 3 documents, and if the judge agrees, and in a minimum of 60 days. The first is the civil cover sheet. It's about who we are. It's our information. It's the same as info we use to file taxes. Next is the domestic relations affidavit. That's all our assets, income, liquid assets, expenses, personal property, real estate, and debts. Last is the petition for divorce. That lists out who gets what we agreed on. The judge gets to make the final decision, and it can all turn south on his say. Dividing up the what we own and owe does not have to be equal in the eyes of the law. Digging in our office desk, I grab last year's tax returns, our 401k files, our banking and loan statements. Since we were both broke after our last divorces, we made it a point to not get into debt. We spent only what we really needed to. Without a mortgage, All-out rent money went for rehabbing the house, buying supplies and basic living. We both knew that a downturn in the economy could bankrupt us again, and I don't trust those scumsucker at the top of the money chain. In the 5 years we've known each other and 3 years married and buying this house, we were able to rebuild out finances. We were finally getting ahead in life. Now at 29, I'm a two-time loser. We own $4,400 on her car and $4,700 on my used truck. Both vehicles aren't worth a shit. We bought them 2 years ago, and they're now both 7 years old. Our credit was still shit from the grind of our last divorces, and our car loans are at 15%. I'm sure they aren't worth what we owe. She makes a little more money than I do, and she came into the marriage with slightly less debt. We both have been able to put away $12,000 a year for the past 4 years in our 401 Burmese chots. If you include the matching, the market boomed and she's got a balance of $65,000 and I've got $60,000. We have an emergency fund of $8,000 and $1,200 in checking. The checking account is only that high because some big bills are due soon. Laws being what they are, I know that I could still get screwed. How should I approach this division of our stuff? What are my most important goals? End marriage quick. Don't lose shirt. No, not like last time when I also lost my soul too. Screw it. Another goddamn merry-go-round? No, not a merry-go-round. What's that old Johnny Cash song line? I've been flushed from the bathroom of your heart. The angel on my left shoulder says, okay, Glenn, be honest, be open, and be non-confrontational. The devil on my right shoulder says, if she fights it and cops an attitude, screw her. Let her know in no uncertain terms that you'll do scorched earth on her. You're not going to be the only one to lose. Make her feel that pain again. It's really shit having to go through this again. But now I've got another goal to meet. How do I prove that she's stepping out? Nanny cams, internet cameras, and all that tech shit overwhelms me. I'm sure they can be rented and I could find somebody to set it up for me. I'm good with engines. I'm shit with setting up software and hardware. Walking aimlessly through what will soon not be our little 2-bedroom house, I realized something. The thing is, I've never seen anything that leads me to believe that she was doing the dirty deed in our bed. Trisha's car's backseat is doable, but damn small. The wannabe wrench has those little rice burners. Not much room in there either. The only other place that has some privacy and is free is the garage, the office in the garage. There's an old futon that would work. She has an hour for lunch, and the wannabe wrench works at his day job nearby. I head on over to the garage. It's at the back of the property. There are 2.5 bays with the half bay being a bit of a storage room or office. I haven't been here in the 3 months he's been here. Opening up the door, I smell hydrocarbons. There are open empty containers of chemicals and empty paint cans laying all around. I had to step around piles of used rags that were grease, solvent, paint, and paint thinner soaked and caked. It looks as if he was dumping the used motor oil on them or the cement floor. Is this place becoming a super fun site? Opening the door to the storage room, I see that I found their place. There are 2 used condom wrappers in the trash. The condoms are smeared with fresh shit. Get calm. Slowly breath in, slowly breath out. Repeat. This is shit. I want to kill the moron and the witch he's plowing. Slowly breath in, slowly breath out. Repeat. Son of a witch, it's actually getting easier. I know that I have to return to work, so I get home at the normal time. I'm a trained mechanic, a professional. This a-hole that's plowing my wife doesn't even rate as a parking lot mechanic. There are piles of used parts, tools, paint cans, and more shit laying around over the 2 garage bays. He's stapled lightweight extension cords to the trusses for more outlets. There are hazardous chemicals in stacks inside the garage. He's turned this place into a fire hazard and chemical dump. Fire hazard? Chemical dump? I got it. It's the perfect answer. She was starting her period yesterday, so her giving him her bum fits. They're probably going to be back again soon. She's got the locator app on her phone because she's lost it several times. I'll be able to see if she's here at lunch, and that'll probably mean that they'll be together. The garage is a fire hazard. Captain Billy is our local fire captain, and we maintain his diesel engines under a time and materials contract. I'm sure I could get him to inspect the garage. I wonder if he could get the city inspector to determine if there is a business being run in this residential zone. I'll leave that for him. In the past, He's told me stories about the things that firefighters see. Finding two cheaters screwing up a storm wouldn't be the first, or the 20th time he's seen it. Back at work at the desk area of the main shop, I pull out the paperwork I brought from home and fire up the old desktop. I'm pitiable on using computers, but my limited experience with Excel windows works. It's my program of choice. Whatever you put something in one of those little boxes, it stays there. That's kind of true, but I can always get help from the office staff. They take pity on us dumb mechanics. The list of what we own and owe starts to happen. Over an hour in, I call the firehouse. It's now set to meet with Captain Billy later today if he isn't out on a call. All in all, I take an hour and a half to list our stuff and craft what I think is a fair division of property. Printing 2 copies, it's time to go to the firehouse. I'll put in for an extended lunch tomorrow in the morning to take care of some private matters. Work is pretty good about those kind of things if you make up the time later. I know that I'm going to have a lot of time later. Hey Glenn, what can I do for you? Captain Billy said to me as he reached for my hand to shake. Well, could we go into your office? It's kind of private. He looked at me with a concern and led the way. What's the problem? Is somebody stealing something? Something unsafe? Something else? Sitting up straight in the chair in front of his desk, I stated out slowly. Captain Billy, we've worked together for the past 7 years, haven't we? He nodded. And I've never asked you for a favor? He shook his head no. I got a big one for you. But I don't want you to do anything if it'll get you in trouble. I think that we're good with one another. So why don't you just say it, and if I can't, all we've talked about is getting the FD to get some more maintenance. I'm damn sure that my wife is getting some on the side. We rent our garage to a wannabe mechanic, and I think that it's him. What do you want me to do? This part is not really in my line of work. Looks like they use the storage room in the garage I rent out to him. The good and bad thing is that he maintains the area to be in a #1 fire hazard. I walked through there earlier today and given a spark or one of his cigarette butts that he throws everywhere, the whole place would go up in minutes. Could you schedule a fire inspection when they're at it? I think that they do it over lunchtime as they both work somewhat nearby. If you and I walk in on them, it won't be a he said, she said. A couple of pictures and I start filing on the divorce. I waited a second and added, I could use a witness and somebody that will help me to not do anything stupid. I really could use your help. And on the other hand, with the inspection, it'll stop that garage from going up in flames, so it'll less work for you in the long run. Captain Billy was quiet and looked at me long and hard. I guess that you were trying to stop somebody from going to jail? I nodded yes as he continued, for murder? I answered, maybe. I just don't want to be in that position. Glenn, as an officer and fireman for over 25 years, I can tell you that I've professionally witnessed a variety of, how shall we say, situations like this. I will do the inspection as you requested as that is my duty. Whatever we find there, as the owner has invited me on the premises, will be public record. Does that help? I smiled and asked, I don't know when I will be there for the property inspection, but I will text you when I am nearby. Could you text me if you are out on a call and can't make it? This time he nodded, and we shook hands before I left. I had a good working relationship before, and he was pretty supportive on what I wanted done. Guess that he did shit like this before. The only thing, he took a rain check on the beer I offered. He told me he'd save it for after it was all over, and he was off duty. Now's the time to go home and act as if nothing is the matter. I started the day off with making sure that the phone locator app for Trisha's phone was working. I looked at her leave home and get to work. The second thing I did was to check in with Captain Billy. If he was going out on a call, he'd text me immediately. The morning was terrible for me. After 10 a.m., I kept checking my phone every 10 minutes. After 11 a.m., it was every 5 minutes and I was a nervous wreck. At 11:35, I saw that Trisha's phone was no longer at work. I had to wait the 10 minutes to see her arrive at the house. That's when I texted Captain Billy, and we met 2 blocks away at the back parking lot of the Mickey DS. I was nervous as hell, but Captain Billy was enjoying the adventure. We left to go to my house. I could see that there were 2 cars in the driveway, Trisha's and the wannabe mechanic's rice bucket. Trisha had no reason to be at home. As agreed, we parked several houses away, out of sight of the garage. Standing in front of my house, I whispered, Captain Billy, We should first go through the house to see if anyone is there. Putting his finger to his lips for silence, he headed toward the garage and cupped his ear. That's when he smiled and whispered, "I hear them out back. My hearing has been shot to hell for years." Pulling out his clipboard and his official camera, he started writing the citation and taking pictures of the fire code violations. It was only a minute outside the garage and then 30 seconds for each garage bay. Standing in front of the closed door where the noises were coming from, he smiled at me and pointed in. I nodded yes. The small room in the back was used as an office and small parts and hand tool storage. It also contained the old futon. Opening the door quietly, the two people on the futon didn't hear a thing. They were screwing up a storm until they saw a flash of a camera, followed by the bright overhead lights flipped on. Then all hell broke loose. Trisha screamed, and Eric pulled out of Trisha's. Trisha attempted to find something to cover herself, but only came up with a very dirty overall, smearing black lube over her naked chest. The fire marshal laughed, and I did too. It was a painful laugh for me. Like finding a rat at the bottom of a 5-gallon paint can, there was no place that they could run to. Tired of waiting for the crying to slow down, Captain Billy looked at the two of them and then directly at the wannabe. By the way, the reason for my visit is to issue you citations for fire code violations. He tore off a piece of paper and gave it to the naked Eric. These things need to be taken care of before you return here. This building is closed until it passes the next inspection. Any questions? Trisha barely stopped crying. For both of them, it was a deer in the headlights look. Captain Billy turned to leave when he gave a parting shot. By the way, if you don't clean up that fecal matter, I'll get the health department here and they'll close you down for their violations too. Chuckling, he said, and oh yes, have a nice day. It's a pleasure to serve you. Turning, as he patted me on the back, he gave me an "I'm sorry" look and then left. I followed him out. Getting to the house, I locked and bolted all the doors and windows. Pulling out a Diet Coke, I went to the bedroom and started tossing all of her clothing into the living room. That was the closest door to her car, or the small spare bedroom. I knew that she'd find the key we hid outside, but she needed to know right away that it was going to be over. I finished in 20 minutes and looked outside. Both of their cars were gone. It was back to work to make up for the 2-hour lunch. Getting home later that night, I sat in the living room. She must have come home and taken all her clothing. Her dresser was missing and some odds and ends. I checked the garage and a rice burner he was working on was gone. I was swearing at the world when the doorbell rang. I prayed that it wasn't the 304. It was Captain Billy. Holding out a handle of Jim Beam and 2 glasses, he said, "Thought that you'd like a little bit of company tonight." That's when he gave me a bro hug, punched my arm, and rambled off into the kitchen for some ice. First off, stop calling me Captain. Okay. As he handed me a tumbler filled with ice and bourbon. And drink this one slow. Don't get shit-faced on me real quick. All I knew is that I needed somebody here tonight. He was here. He listened to me rant and rave, cry and scream, whine and moan. It was 5 years, and the life I thought we were building went up in smoke in that laundry basket. In the morning, I woke up still dressed in everything but my shoes. I was on the couch and under a blanket. There was a handwritten note from Billy to call. He stopped on by for the next 2 evenings. On that last night, the doorbell rang. I've been dreading that doorbell. Standing at the door was Trisha. The wannabe was a few feet behind her. I slammed the door and turned off the lights. She kept ringing the doorbell and tried to use her key to get in, but the locks had been changed that first evening. Changed the locks on the garage too. That was the best $150 I ever spent. After a couple of minutes of the doorbell ringing, Billy stood up. "Let me handle this. You sat here." "Okay." I nodded yes as he walked to the front door and stepped outside, closing the door behind him. After 5 minutes, there was a screech of tires. I was relieved, until Billy walked in with Trisha behind him. "Glenn, why don't you get the paperwork you were working on and bring it to the kitchen table?" "Okay." He nodded to the shelf where I put it. In the past several days, Billy and I had gone over the division of property. That's when I found out that his sister had gone through a nasty divorce, and he was well versed in the emotional, legal, and gut-wrenching pain of a marriage in tatters. He got help with his sister's divorce and felt bound to help other people along too. Here was a guy that believed in paying it forward and lived it. Trisha sat down at the far end, and I dropped a copy of our assets and debts in front of her. I gave her a few minutes to see what we had, then I started a summary. House can go on the market for $210,000 and should net out after paying the realtor about $202,000. Trisha gasped. It was obvious that she never knew what my efforts were worth. With taxes, givebacks, and other selling costs, we should net $194,000. You keep your car and payments, and I keep my car and payments. You keep your 401k with a balance of $65,000, and I keep mine at $60,000. We split the emergency fund of $8,000 and use the remaining of the checking account to pay off the bills. I've already paid off our credit cards and canceled them. She winced when I said that. If you agree, we can file immediately, and with luck, we can move on in 60 days. At that point, I clenched my teeth. Billy and I talked several times that emotions were no place to be in a money negotiation. I remember that from last time. I may have been a lot younger and immature then. I don't have that excuse now. I am sorry, Glenn. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. Trisha, just don't go there. The problems with this marriage started a year in, and that was 2 years ago. You wanted a beautiful house, and because we couldn't afford it, I had to rehab this fixer-upper. That's where my time, our money, and my energy went. I exhaled. I exhaled frustration and pain. And you didn't help much at all. You've been stepping out for what? How long? I closed my eyes. Actually, it really doesn't matter how long you've been getting strange, does it? She shook her head no as I continued. We both were cheated on in our first marriages. We both knew what that felt like. Tell me, if you caught me with another woman, or even another guy, what would you have done? Tell me everything would work out and be okay? Tell me that you'd forgive me. Turning away, she started crying. I didn't bother to pass her the tissues. She was going to be on her own, and that was going to be starting right now. The wannabe mechanic, I said as I looked out the window to the garage. I'm guessing it started before we rented out the garage to the wannabe. That's when you were starting to get some strange. Still looking away, I could see her face in a reflection on a storm window. She showed her nodding yes and looking at the carpet. Tired of living in a construction zone for the big projects, the kitchen, and the main bath. For 3 years we tried to make it financially, to get a good home. It took all of my vacation those 3 years. The main bathroom took 6 weeks as bigger problems were discovered that added weeks to the completion. We wanted it. We wanted it. I wanted it because you wanted it. I closed my eyes and interlocked my fingers. I did not want to lose control of my hands. Working like dogs on our dream home, he snorted in disgust. Or should I say your dream home for the past 3 years has increased in value. Honey, Stop it right now. I'm no longer your honey. This marriage died, and it died when you chose to get some extra. You can't take it back. I can never trust you again, so don't even try. She hung her head and looked away. You came in this marriage after you were burned from your last one. You had to punish somebody for that. Somebody is always wrong. Somebody always has to be made to pay. She started to object when I silenced her with a stare. To make your ex pay, you've burned me. When anything goes wrong in your life, somebody has to pay. That's what you do. So don't give me any shit about this. She shuddered. I know that I hit home with that. That's the thing about people. They do dumb shit things for stupid reasons. I've seen you do stupid stuff before. Not anywhere near as bad as this, but dumb shit stuff anyway. But it was early in our relationship, and we were able to work it out. I did my own dumb shit stuff too, and we worked that out too. I paused. This was the atomic bomb of mistakes. There is no way you could tell me that we'd be able to pick up the pieces from this nuclear blast of betrayal. I paced back and forth in the kitchen. We got 2 choices. Fight it out and watch whatever money we have be spent on lawyers, or we agree to something and get out quickly. What do you want to do? I was holding another envelope. Trisha nodded. She knew that it could just get into a pissing match. She knew all about lawyers and divorces. Her first marriage ended because she and her husband were young and immature. They spent their time arguing and fighting instead of trying to figure out how to make things work out. Whenever there was a problem, he would find somebody to hook up with. It was 18 months in the marriage, over 3 years of being together when he gave her a case of the crabs. What was anger before turned into rage? Against his advice, she directed her lawyer to make her husband pay. At the end, they both had to borrow money to pay off their lawyers. That self-righteous anger didn't keep anyone but their lawyers warm at night. Trisha nodded to me to continue. I opened the envelope and pulled out a couple of sheets of paper. He then spread them across the table so they both could read them clearly. To get a divorce in this state, all our assets have to be declared. I've recorded all that I could find. That's what that first document was about. This next document was a spreadsheet with 3 columns. Pointing to the columns, he said, the property, then who owns it, and then its value. We both came into this marriage with minor assets. We were both broke with a shit-ass credit score. When our jobs became steady, we saved, lived on the cheap, and paid $50,000 cash for this bank repo. I proposed that we sell this house and split whatever we get down the middle. We also split the little bit of emergency fund we made down the middle, and what's left of the checking account down the middle. You keep your 401 Burmese chots, and I'll keep my 401 Burmese chots. We have no debt except for the cars. You take yours and I'll take mine. No income maintenance for either of us. I could see that Trisha was still in shock and the dollar figures were not helping. She was more than broke 5 years ago at 24 and now at 29. She could walk away with over $100,000? And her 401k. Why don't you think about it overnight? Just make sure that overnight is not in this house. This shocked her. I think that there was a part of her that thought that she could salvage the marriage. She never was one to fully think things out. And now she realized that not only was her marriage over, the only place to sleep was with Eric in his shithole of a studio apartment. What? How? Go with Loverboy. He's been so good for you. He should gladly take you in now. All I know is not this house, not this bedroom, not this bed. Understand? Trisha started crying, and at this point I laughed. Great try. Ain't gonna work this time. Go out to the garage. You're very familiar with the futon, aren't you? You could sleep there if you really need a place. She started to mouth something as I continued. Cut the shit. There's a bunch of stains on the pad, and why don't you count up all the condom wrappers in the trash bin while you're at it? Downcast, she got up and left. At the street, she texted something, and Eric picked her up in a minute. I closed my eyes when Billy handed me a tumbler filled with ice and Jim Beam. Glenn, you didn't do half bad. Not half bad. He picked up his glass, and we went over everything that happened. He left around midnight. Trisha hadn't figured out that I was still tracking her by the phone locator app. I wanted to know where she was at, and it told me a whole lot. She was only at work or at the wannabe's apartment since I caught them. That building was a dive and cockroach infested. Somehow that gave me pleasure. I spent my evenings cleaning up the garage from being a Superfund site. There was no way I'd be able to show the house with it looking like this. Work allowed me to bring the chemicals and other hydrocarbon waste to their EPA-approved waste removal contractor. That saved me at least $1,000 in costs. I packaged the remaining tools, parts and part scrap on pallets, and had it delivered to the wannabe's apartment complex. I'm sure he was thrilled. The delivery guy was a buddy of mine and did it for cheap. He got the apt super to sign for it too. It was over 1,600 pounds with at least 1,000 pounds of sheer scrap metal. With pennies on the pound, it'll cost him more to get it hauled away than he could ever get for it. I wrapped it in plastic with his name and address in large letters so the rain didn't damage anything. I would occasionally look to see where her phone said she was. For the next 2 days, she never left the wannabe's apartment, even when I knew she was at work. Then her phone disappeared. I thought that was strange. It was over a week after I delivered the crap back to the wannabe. I got a text from Trisha to meet. I suggested we meet at the firehouse on Tuesday at 8. There are meeting rooms available that Billy told me that we could use. I'd also wouldn't have to worry about wannabe, and Billy would be in the background. I knew that it would make it safer for her and me. I arrived at 7:30 and hung out with Billy until Trisha arrived in her car. There was no sign of wannabe. 2 friendly and burly firefighters met her at the car and escorted her to the firehouse and Billy. He brought her to meet me in the back conference room. Walking in, she sat down at the opposite end of the table. Knowing someone that well, I realized that I really didn't know her all that well. I didn't greet her. I only just looked at her, not saying a thing. She was looking uncomfortable, but I really didn't give a shit. At the least, I'd hear what she had to say. Clearing her throat, she said, "Glenn, I'm sorry." Then I cut her off with a, "Stop that shit right now." That's when Billy put his hand on my shoulder to calm me down. It worked. Quietly, he told me, "Glenn, she's got the floor. Let her say what she has to say." Okay, I heard my friend. Closing my eyes, it took me a minute of silence to calm myself. I finally nodded yes, opened my eyes, and waited. "I'm sorry, Glenn. Getting involved with Eric just kind of happened. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did." She wiped some tears from her eyes and continued, "You were partially right. I knew him from after my first divorce. He always paid attention to me when I hung out at the bars with my friends. I didn't think anything was going to develop when he wanted to rent the garage. But spending some time, things changed." She choked a sob and looked directly into my eyes. "I was wrong. Okay, I was goddamn wrong. There is no excuse for that. And there is no way to take it back." I saw Trisha's tears flow for the next 5 minutes. "You were right. Once it happened, there was no excuse. Your wife became a 304. I knew that she hated that word. She was not pretending with me. I didn't expect this." It was then she closed her eyes for a minute to steady herself. "I know that you'll never trust me again. I don't even know if I could ever trust me again. We need to end this marriage as quick and as painless as possible. It's the least I could do for you. I'm moving to Denver to be near my sister Nicole's and her husband Ben and their kids. I found out that I could transfer there from my work. You said to split everything down the middle. I'm okay with that unless you have something else in mind." She was giving me the end of the marriage. No fight, no anger, just, dare I think it, 2 hurt people? "Trisha, we can sell the house and each of us pull out half and then we're done and gone. You keep your assets, I keep mine. I don't want the house or want to buy you out of it. Glenn, that was going to be our house until I did something criminal to you. I believe that a-hole. He kept telling me that a wife of his would never have to work that hard, give up so much. A real man would pamper his wife and do all the good things for her." She picked up a tissue and wiped her eyes. I was played. She wiped her eyes again and took a deep breath. "There are people in this world that are evil. I fell for his lies about you, about me. I stopped believing in us when I listened to him." At that, the tears rained out of her and she was sobbing uncontrollably. "What the hell do I do now?" My friend Bill retired to one of the far Denver suburbs 2 years ago and invited me up to see him and his wife Alicia. It was a second marriage for both of them, and with this one, he got 2 grown stepsons, a grown stepdaughter, their spouses, and 3 step-grandchildren with another one on the way. He was happy and I was glad. It had been 3 years since my marriage blew up. We sold the house quickly and split everything like we agreed. I can't say that we were okay with what happened, but I was no longer as angry as before. Yes, she did wrong, but then again, yes, she was seduced by a master. And finally, yes, she owned what she did and started to look at why. That was probably most important to me, and I'm still trying to figure out why it was important to me. I haven't talked with her or seen her since. Trisha had a bushel basket full of problems that I knew were there. Our divorce made her realize that she needed to deal with the issues of her life professionally. She would send me a summary of what she's found in herself in the Christmas card every year. In a way, it was gratifying and pleasing to see her finally get happier in life. It helped me with my pain too. So many things I could see, she was now able to see them too. What I didn't know was how well she dealt with them. Either way, it was a good thing she was 600 miles away from Overland Park. For the wannabe, he ran into a stretch of luck and it's been all bad. Billy kept up with his firehouse friends, and he gave me the inside scoop on the parts one didn't know. From our realtor, I found out he ended up putting in the highest bid on the house, by over $10 grand. He beat out 3 others in a second round of bidding. Something tells me that he really liked the garage. He got the house and Trisha and I split the money like we agreed. Her part was wired to her account in the Denver suburbs where she was living with her sister Sandy, the husband Ben, and their 2 kids, Mary and Mike. I'm still trying to figure out why in the world would someone name both kids with the same starting letter. I know that I am a bit passive-aggressive, and I really couldn't help myself on this. I did leave the wannabe a couple of little gifts in the house. In attempting to re-sweat a hot water pipe, I was able to create a slight drip in one of the walls and added some mold spores to keep the drip company. Replacing and repainting that entire piece of drywall, there was nothing to be seen. There was flashing around the chimney that passed inspection and, for some reason, failed again after the bid was accepted. A couple of loose, wind-damaged shingles with the spores strategically placed below the leak will be a welcome to your new home present from me. I was having fun thinking of the common maintenance tasks that could fail and what the long-term cost would be. I made sure that anything I would do would not kill anyone, just inconvenience or cost a lot. My pride and joy was damaging the flashing around the new windows and doors. Unless he got on a ladder, he'd never see the drilled pinholes that leaked water behind the vinyl siding into the wafer board below. With the rains we get, it'll take 5 years for the damage to become apparent. What I knew of the wannabe, he did not believe in maintenance. I got a little creative in the garage, rewiring the 4 circuits to where a single circuit would cover 90% of the outlets. It was the only 15-amp circuit. The others were 20 amps. That was done just for fun. But the best thing that happened to him started with a new inspection by the fire department. This is where I got the confidential info on the wannabe. Billy had just retired, and the new guy was following up on all previous known problems. Wannabe was working like he always did, and the garage and grounds became another fire hazard. Once again, he was issued a citation and the garage and grounds were closed. Then there was another government visit, and he was cited for operating a business in a residential area. 2 weeks later, there was a fire with the garage. It roared quickly into an uncontrollable blaze. Funny thing, it could have been a spontaneous combustions from the rags and summer temps, but the arson investigation ruled that out. The best they did was to find it started in the office on that futon. From there, did it spread to the rags on the floor and then the walls and rafters? Only a few people knew this detail. There was a hope to find out who started the fire by staying quiet. I was in the clear as I was fishing in the Ozarks and went to see a couple of shows in Branson. The next part of the fire was that it was summer and wannabe never watered the grass or even cut it. The 18-inch dry uncut grass took the flames to the house and the dryer vent. The non-clean dryer vent was full of highly flammable dryer lint, and the plastic dryer vent hose flamed up in seconds. The fire department were able to partially save the house, but it was so severely damaged that it was totaled. When all was said and done, the insurance would not pay a dime to the wannabe, not even for the cleanup. Cited twice for fire violations and operating an unlicensed business in a residential zone gave the insurance company enough cover to deny his claim due to negligence. The improperly stored chemicals and paints brought in the possibility of criminal charges. They were starting to push for insurance fraud when he withdrew his claims. Wannabe filed for bankruptcy and moved away to Florida. I don't know, but I guess that the mortgage holders went after the insurance company for something. I say, let the big guys fight it out. The neighbors were thrilled when the city leveled the lot and planted grass. Walking into Bill and Alicia's backyard, I realized that he now had a large extended family. I know that it was the weekend of the 4th, but there must have been at least 50 family members of all generations hanging out, talking, playing games, eating, and drinking. After the first 8 introductions, I knew I was lost. I needed name tags. That when I told them that I'm really good remembering things people say, just not names. So I'm going to nod and smile a lot. I was staying 2 nights at the Motel 6 and then going to the national parks for a little bit of tent camping. I made camp reservations and was getting into an area that I wouldn't have to worry about large carnivores. It would not be a relaxing vacation if I was afraid of being thought of as a possible dinner. For this party, I was going to enjoy myself and was going to hoist a few. Billy told me that he's got a pair of DDs to drive me the half-mile back to the motel if I shouldn't drive. Then he told me he'd be upset if I wasn't enjoying myself enough that his DD wouldn't have to drive. It was a couple of hours of good times when someone familiar came up to me. I didn't know her name, but I could swear that I'd seen her face before. When I wasn't around anyone, she walked up to me. Her first word was hi, but connecting that voice and her face was all I needed to know who it was. Hi, Nicole. It was Trisha's sister. She had Trisha's accent and a strong family resemblance. We had met briefly at the wedding 7 years ago when Trisha and I attended. I had not seen her since, but Trisha did have a few pictures that came out once in a while, when our construction allowed. I was wondering if I could have a quiet chat with you? I know that this is probably at the top of your list. You know, Right next to an unmedicated root canal? She smiled and I chuckled. Sure, why not? I've just had my... And I stopped. As a throwaway line. I've often said that my heart's been torn out and I obviously have lost my mind. But the serious look on her face stopped me. I knew that she was being real. There's a couple of chairs over by the fence. Could I get you a refill on what you're drinking, and I'll do the same? Why don't we both hit the coolers together? She paused. Thanks. Thanks for what? What did I do? I did. Glenn, you're listening to me, and I think you see my seriousness. She picked up a Coors Light and I flinched. Bath water? I have to sit down with you and watch you drink bath water? She shook her head in laughter. At the least, try the Fat Tire. It's Foot Collins, that's local. She looked at the new Belgium Amber Ale I had in my hand, and then reached for my suggested beer. As we walked to the chairs near the fence, she asked, Are you always so difficult? Nah, not really. But I do have my standards in beer. And I chuckled. She sat down and I became serious. How is Trisha doing? I get her Christmas cards and her notes on the things she's been finding out about herself. But there's nothing more I know. She's sending you that? She hasn't told me she's done that. Nicole paused and then continued. First off, she doesn't know that you're here. Hell, I didn't know that you'd been here. She knows that Captain Billy is here, but that's about all. Since she came here, she's gone through a massive changes. She started dealing with the sexual abuse that happened when she was in high school and... What? What's sexual abuse? She never told you? I nodded no and motioned for her to continue. It was a teacher in the school. He played her real good, until a janitor found something in his trash can and he got caught. In those days, they allowed him to disappear and got counseling for his victims. There were two and Trick was the second one. She was 14. That would explain a lot about Trisha. Then married to her first husband that beat her within an inch of her life. My jaw dropped. Nicole, she never told me that. She only said that he gave her a case of the crabs from his around when they had a fight. Okay, what else don't I know about her? Well, she's gotten so much better that she started to fight back. I nodded for her to continue. At her work, she filed a complaint against a corporate officer for sexual harassment. She couldn't fully substantiate it in a court of law with their lawyers. They were going to sweep it under the carpet. That's when another 4 women came with their stories, and it went to corporate. He ended up with his walking papers and a golden parachute that ended up being lead. The company settled and also got rid of the idiots that were protecting him. Excuse me, this is Trisha? This is the woman that would fade into the background if there was any arguments with anybody? Well, it's not all roses, but it's been a big start. She also paid back Eric for what he did to her and you. She set fire to that futon and he lost everything from that. How do you know that for sure? Silly, I drove her there. Then I watched her do it. Setting up one of his spare cigarettes and oily rags on the futon started it quickly. She used the spare key you gave her after the locks were changed so she could get some of her stuff that was in the garage. I bet you forgot about it. That a-hole never changed the locks. You do know that there is an arson investigation going on? The case remains open. You realize that you are the 3rd person in the entire world who knows who did it? What else is going on with Trisha? She's been a great aunt and babysitter to my kids. She goes to therapy religiously, and she goes to religion for therapy. She chuckled. Does that help? She chuckled and I smiled. Then I motioned her to continue. Because you are here and you've been honest and open with me, I'll say a little bit more. She took a large swig of the beer and then made a questioning face. No unpleasant, not happy, but questioning. I don't know, but you may have changed my mind about beer. Putting the bottle down, she continued. When she was abused by that teacher, she was an 8 out of 10 on the screwed up scale of 0 to 10. With her first husband, it was 9 out of 10. When you first met her, she was number 7 on out of 10. I nodded. When you got married and until that a-hole rented your garage, she is a 5 out of 10. You were pretty good for her. I don't know if I ever thanked you for that. I loved how she changed for the better. I know that my face became tense. I could feel the pain well up in me. That's when Nicole reached over and took my beer away from me and held my hands. A couple of tears rolled down my scruffy beard-covered cheeks. It's okay, Glenn. Just hang with me. Please. I nodded yes and waited. On the day that you both were at the firehouse and agreed to split, she told you briefly what happened. She told you that Eric was evil. It appears that he was using the same techniques that were used on her in high school by that teacher. We both know that she was fragile, and that son of a witch was a master to plug right back in. It is amazing how they do it, but at this, a tear rolled down her cheek. That scumsucker preyed on her for those 3 months. He was subtitle, cutting a real big, well, anyway. Both of you guys were getting the house together and kind of lost sight of each other. I raised my hand when she put it back down. I know, I've been there too. Ben and I spent 6 months rebooting our relationship with an LCSW. I was the witch wife, and he was the abused husband. People do wrong. Sometimes we can do better together. Sometimes we can do better apart. Ben and I did better together. You and Trick needed to be apart. I thought about what she had said and where she was leading. What do you want out of me is the $64,000 question, isn't it? I don't know. I didn't know you'd be here. You weren't on anyone's radar. Trick never said anything about contacting you. To be honest, I really don't know. All I know is that when I saw you, all I wanted to tell you that my sister is not the same. With Eric, she went back to a screwed up 9 out of 10. It's funny. As in funny strange, she was a 6 out of 10 when she arrived here. I really believe that you treating her right, well as right as you could, helped to reset herself. The 3 years of therapy and getting back into church has made a difference. What do you want out of me? I still don't know, and I doubt that I ever will. The important thing is that because of you, I'm getting my sister back. She's been fixing a lot of her issues. So what I'm really saying is thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. We sat there in silence when I heard another familiar voice. I'd like to thank you too. It was Trisha. She was standing there with tears in her eyes and trembling. I immediately stood up and knocked over my beer and Nicole's too. Oh hell, slipped out of my mouth before I knew I was going to say it. I reached over and held Trisha's hand. How long have you been standing there? About 30 seconds after you both sat down. Ben wanted to stay home with the kids, and since the dogs can't handle the fireworks, he told me to go to the party. Trisha, could I interest you in any one of the new Belgium beers? I suggest a fine fat tire, but there are others. I appear to have corrupted you, sister, to drink much more flavorful beers, and I would like the chance to do the same with you. Without waiting for an answer, I grabbed her hand and we marched over to the coolers. It was 2 people willing to see where it would lead. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.